Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, the show about ways to stay competitive in a changing market, break through business plateaus, and respond to the changing expectations of today's customers. Your host, Jess Dewell, is a rapid growth entrepreneur, consultant, and business advocate with a 20-year track record of business excellence. She candidly discusses how to achieve your growth strategy and realize your company's unfulfilled potential. Now, here's Jess.
You are in the right place for conversations about current needs that we as business leaders are facing regarding technology, customer expectations, and quickly changing markets. This program is about what it means to reach our short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. Today's program is titled Leadership Blindspots. It is program 187. Our panel today consists of two people, Pamela Barroway, who brings 15 years of marketing and communication experience. She provides editing and content creation for business and books. Pen in hand or virtually in mind, she promotes your voice to the web and social media, as well as in print and in email. Also joining us is Liana Pomeroy, who recognizes the nuances that make similar situations different. She is a mortgage specialist that problem solves and navigates the ever-changing lending and mortgage landscape. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. All right, so here we go. We're going to jump right in. Liana, what do you think is your own leadership blind spot?
Thank you for asking that. It's a really challenging question because I think blind spots are things we don't see, right? So when I look back the last 17 plus years in the mortgage industry, I can tell you I've had plenty of blind spots. And in our industry as a whole, there have been a lot of upsets and changes. It's something I love to tell my clients is it took me 2 years before I felt comfortable in the business. And then they changed everything once I finally figured out what I was doing. Being comfortable with blind spots for me is really the key. Being able to admit mistakes, being able to be with people and say, you know what, that didn't work. I'm so sorry. To be able to own what's happening in the moment and change course when needed. I think maybe that's the most important thing about blind spots is making friends with them, being okay with blind spot. Early in my career, I was a big fan of George Soros, who is quite a sort of contested character. I mean, lots of people like him, lots of people don't. But one thing I learned from him when I was first in business was to be able to be self-reflexive, to think about, you know, what just happened? What choice did I make? And take a look at it and analyze it and see if there was something I missed, something I did wrong. He says that Americans don't do that enough, and I would tend to agree. So I've spent a lot of time working with my own limitations and making friends with them and getting to know them. And I think with my team at work, it's one of the things I'm told that they appreciate about me is that I'm willing to be real. I'm willing to be raw, make mistakes, apologize if something doesn't quite work. You know, in my business, we depend on probably minimum of 10 people in every transaction. So we're constantly dealing with issues that come up and having to problem solve together. And if I can't admit I made a mistake or I missed something, I can't do my job and they can't help me do my job better. I think that's probably the biggest thing is being able to make friends with what didn't work. Yesterday, I was looking at something by the Spanx CEO. I think her name is Sarah Blakely. And it was the coolest interview I'd seen in a long time. You know, she talked about how growing up, she learned to look for mistakes. So for her, you know, coming home from school, her dad would say, well, what did you fail at today? And I love that because to me, that's the key, right? Being okay with the blind spot, being okay with the screw up and going, oh, look at that. What did I learn? How could I do it better? You know, this world changes every day. So we have to be able to be self-reflexive. We have to be able to get intimate and close with our problems and the things we don't know yet.
Pam, what do you think is one of your leadership blind spots?
Well, mine are three interconnected items. I'll preface this by saying that I started working in corporate communications about a quarter century ago, and this was outside the home. Now I'm a freelancer. I work from home. And it brings a whole different dynamic to the blinds, what one's blind spots are. So this is, I would say, within the last 10 years. So the first one is the reality of how much work it takes to make a viable living freelancing. It can be a slog, and it is never ending. You don't just drive to work or walk to work and sit down and know that your projects are going to be waiting for you. You have to go seek out those projects. And that's my blind spot with regards to that, is just recognizing the enormity of that and not just sublimating it, because if I don't recognize it, I can't act upon it. The second part of that is to get the business and make the connections. The necessity in 2018 of having a robust social media marketing plan for yourself on, one or two platforms that you focus on. It doesn't have to be a huge undertaking, but you do have to have it, and you do have to be focused about it and methodical so that you are making those connections and getting leads. And then that leads me to the third portion of this, the need to plan out and schedule my priorities around social media marketing, just overall business planning with regards to freelancing. And all these three play together. It's really about self-awareness of these issues and not just sort of like shoving them to the back of your mind because it's inconvenient that one day or one week. You have to be aware of it going forward, or it's just going to build up and one day you're not going to have any business, or you could be like, oh my God, I've let this slide for so long. What do I do? And then you're in panic mode, and that's never good.
And I think that happens in any role.
Yes.
Right? I mean,
yes.
The three things that you described, we can put into any role. I know I feel it in my role, right? And the things that, Liana, that you were saying around just making friends, that is a level of awareness that most of us, it's easier to not make friends. It's easier to power through, avoid, right? Go out, around, under, over, any way except for the hard way. And I think that's one of the things that when we're thinking about this and we're thinking about awareness really comes into play. And so if you were to define awareness, how would you describe having an awareness of blind spots to somebody else? What does awareness look, sound, and feel like in the sense of this topic?
In order for us to become aware of a blind spot, we have to take it from back here where, we don't see it. That's the kind of the point of a blind spot, right? And bring it to the forefront. So awareness of our blind spots takes something, right? We have to be willing to, well, like I was saying before, we have to be willing to make friends with it. We have to be okay with recognizing and acknowledging that we're not perfect, which is, none of us is perfect, but, that's a human challenge, I would think. That becoming aware of something that we're uncomfortable with is the first step. Allowing that into our foreground and seeing it in front of us and being able to be with it. So awareness of a blind spot starts there. And then I do think that you still have to take a look at it, get intimate with what didn't work, what didn't happen, the things we're most uncomfortable with, actually. I think that's what awareness with our blind spots feels like.
Mm-hmm.
So awareness is the first step, but action is the second step. And so there needs to be some concrete and positive action to recognize and surmount the blind spot. Whether it's taking, a date book and just writing everything in your date book, not the day of, but the night before. Because in my case, the day of is too late. And this is the planning aspect of everything. And it doesn't have to be like an hour thinking of what you need to do. 10 minutes just to jot down. And of course, things change as you're doing it, but just have a rough outline. And then in the morning, sitting down and before I do any housework or anything else that needs to be done, the laundry, because there's always laundry and there's always something, right?
There's always something.
In my office, it's where is the last pen I found? And you know how I solved that? I got 3 of these. Right. For those of you listening, these is a pencil holder filled to the brim with everything you might need in a pinch, including a rocket that you can launch from a straw.
The odd thing about you showing me that, I have something similar to that in my kitchen. And I just went, but I couldn't fit any more stuff into it. I had to go through it.
We're going to stick there. Do we accumulate blind spots?
Unless you're aware of them and are taking steps to mitigate them, then yes, one blind spot can build, it can build up. One can build upon another in a really negative way until you're just like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
So what happens when you start looking at these blind spots? And this is in your experience, right? So when you, because I have my own experience, and I'm very curious about yours in the sense that when I find one blind spot and I really sit with and I hold it and I have awareness and I'm willing to take action on it, usually I start getting pummeled with lots of things. I mean, things that I know about and things that I don't know about, right? So they could be weaknesses, they could be strengths, they could be external reactions because I'm changing, they could be, who knows what, right? But it's like, find and look at one thing and you find out everything else around it was dirtier.
To me, that reminds me of meditation practice. So I've been teaching and doing a mindfulness practice for about 40 years now. One of the things that I come across, people start looking at anything, right? When we get quiet and we sit down and we really look at anything we're doing or thinking, especially the stuff that's not working, at first it feels bigger, right? It's scarier, it's worse. So some people would come to me when I would teach and say, well, my therapist said to come learn to meditate so I'd calm down and get more peaceful. And I would always laugh and say, well, maybe, but it might get worse first. And so, blind spots is an area of, of stress. It's something we didn't do right. And I know for myself, I want to be an expert. I want to be really good at what I do. I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but it's hard to admit that I make mistakes. And so when I look at a blind spot, it's going to get louder and bigger and messier first. But actually, once I dig in and allow it closer, like what I was saying before, it calms down. It becomes a teaching tool instead of a problem.
So basically you're saying when I can't handle it anymore,
yeah,
it becomes a priority.
Correct. And then you give it attention and then it calms down, right? When we give things attention, they're no longer hooking us. So for me, when I think about blind spots, it's things that I'm not doing well or things I'm stepping over and pretending are okay when maybe they just really need my attention. And once I look at them, I'm able to get power around that situation again. I'm able to examine it and then find out, okay, once I admit my mistake, then I can step back into power and actually solve the problem.
I hear what you're saying.
And then the hook isn't there anymore. Then it actually dissipates rather quickly and sometimes can even become an opportunity for some new great thing to happen. Often, for me, that's true. I mean, in mortgage, something goes wrong all the time. I mean, there's just so many moving parts. And so if I'm relating to the problem and I can take a step back and look at it, usually there's a really easy solution. So usually 5 minutes after the uh-oh or the, not feeling good is, oh, wow, that's even better. Isn't that great? There's actually some positive that comes out of it.
I'm going to relate this to editing and copywriting. Sometimes you look at one problem and other problems do tend to appear after that. And it's really hard sometimes not to just shut down mentally. And you look at one thing and then it's like dominoes, and you're just like, God, it's too much. And I like this kind of challenge. So the good thing is working through it, like pulling a string of pearls and then seeing the line through which you can solve the grammar problem, or it's not a logical flow from the beginning of the paragraph to the end. And once you solve that, it's like, now I can move on to the next one and the next one. It's kind of like that with other blind spots too. When I find myself getting overwhelmed with the enormity of one leading to the other, come back to the original one and focus on the original one. Sometimes it's really hard to do that. It's just omnipresent, That's why I have lists. I'm a big list person. And going back to my list or the one particular item on the list and focusing on that, then getting that done, then not moving on to the next thing till that one thing is done, if that can occur, or having a designated endpoint to the item, like an awareness that you can't get done today, but this is what you're going to get done today. Then moving on, then you tackle the next thing.
My workday has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in my workday, I have a meeting, right? Or we have a recording like this. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So our days are made up of these beginning and middle and ends, and together they build this bigger story. And sometimes they don't make sense. Sometimes they do. And sometimes there seems to be no logic. And sometimes it seems there's only backwards progress instead of forward progress, right? Whatever those, when we find those things, it comes something that was said at the beginning by each of you in different ways, which was, I have a choice. I have a choice to notice. I have a choice to act. I have a choice. I have a choice. I have a choice. And so when we're talking in relationship to ourselves and self-awareness, how did you get to the point for you that there was a blind spot or there was something that you wanted to change and become more aware of about yourself to take a step toward self-awareness?
Oh, it's funny. I'm not speaking like that right now, but I have a tendency to talk too fast. And clients tell me this, right? So clients will actually talk to me about that. They'll say, can you slow down? And it used to really upset me until I realized that it was just a teaching tool, right? So this was a big blind spot. I mean, I would just railroad through everybody and talk so fast. And everyone always says, oh, you're from the East Coast, right? Well, I'm not actually. I'm from Colorado and California. But I had this big problem where I would talk so fast and people would say, I think you're saying something interesting or useful, but I have no idea what you're talking about. Can you start over? And I've had it happen so many times that I've taken note. And so now I take it as a compliment even. You know, I know you're saying something good. I know it's important. You're so passionate, right? I mean, clients have helped me with this, but it's definitely an area where I now can have fun with it.
Was I going to stay a freelancer and put in the work that admitting that it was going to take a lot more commitment and putting in that work, or put my time to better use by finding a job in corporate again, which of course when you're of a certain age, say in your 50s, that can be problematic as well. You know, it's like weighing both of these things and deciding, you know, pros and cons, getting some feedback, and then saying, okay, I will take some action and try to make a go of this, because where my family life is right now, freelancing makes more sense given my son's age and just the flexibility. So that way my husband and I don't have to be like, oh my God, who's going to pick him up from this sport or that sport or just whatever. Identified 3 tracks. What do I do to get business from those tracks? And so that's kind of where I am right now. Stop thinking about it and go out, do something to get to that goal.
You're listening to The Voice of Bold Business Radio. In every program, we share stories, tips, and concepts that benefit short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. For additional perspectives on your growth strategy, Jess Dewell is your business advisor and consultant. Go to voiceofboldbusiness.com and click the Find Out More button to get started. Now, back to Jess.
Don't forget to use hashtag VBBRadio or email radio@reddirection.com to get your questions answered on air, to submit your stories and experiences. And in fact, we have a question that came in after program 184 that we're going to answer right now. We'll come back to the show right after this. One of our recent live shows, program 184, Who's in Charge of Your Growth Strategy, had some questions come in after the program had concluded. And so I wanted to take a minute and answer this one for you in this program. All right, the question is, I am making solid connections. I am also having difficulty translating those connections into growth. For example, getting a new client, getting a referral, getting a lead, etc. What's a freelancer to do? Now, if you remember back in that program, I said everybody was in charge of growth strategy. Each person has a role and a responsibility. And in this case, for a freelancer specifically, what I would recommend is to recognize and prioritize what are the actions in my business that will lead to growth. Okay. And by the way, leads, new clients, referrals, sales in general is pretty high up there. So if we just stuck with that, okay, so now you've got your priorities, one of which is, what does that sales process look like? How do I ask for business? What are the ways we engage and invite people to know what we are offering within our business as the services or products that they could buy, right? That they can purchase from us. And then there's going to be a whole subset of skills that are associated with this. So you're making solid connections, which means you're making a genuine contact, something that you're able to hear and listen. And so now there's a new skill. There's a skill to think about where in this conversation is the right time to ask a question that qualifies this person as being right for my service or my product. And at that moment, right, being able to have the space to think about that would be the skill to practice. Finding the moment with which to say, I have a question for you, and you know whatever question you're going to ask is going to qualify them as a short-term lead, or maybe a medium length lead, or maybe not a lead at all in terms of future business. So that is how I would say, take that connection, break it down into priorities, and using that priority to figure out what is the question to ask and where does it get inserted, and work with those two elements and see how that changes conversations and how that impacts getting more people in the pipeline, having more products and services purchased, whatever your action and intention are. Thank you for sending in the question afterward. And remember, that is from program 184. You can see all the program notes there, voiceofboldbusiness.com/P184. Thanks so much for tuning in live. And for those of you listening today, take the time to hop on over at the next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Mountain, 1 p.m. Eastern, and join us live, have that conversation, and regardless, keep the conversation going just like Pam did. You are listening to program 187, Leadership Blindspots, and I'm talking with Pamela Barroway and Liana Pomeroy. We're talking a lot about awareness, because really any blind spot we have, leadership or otherwise, is our willingness and openness to recognize there's stuff we're not looking at. How does incorporating blind spots impact that concept of setting priorities?
The biggest thing I've learned around this topic is to slow down and really listen to myself more. Start the day with, I think Pam was talking about lists. So start the day with, well, what does my day look like? What do I need to prioritize? So, and also put things aside and say, this is not important. One of my biggest blind spots in life has been just charging forward without thinking about it, and not giving time and space to planning and putting in the time. And so as I've grown in business and as a business leader and as a salesperson, I've learned to just prioritize the day, to be able to time block. I love time blocking. I love prioritizing, using business planning tools, because if I don't have them, I just charge through my day. I don't even notice what's going on. I just, and especially in the business I'm in, it's really easy to just start the train and keep going until I fall over. And in my 30s, I did that. I got adrenal burnout because I ended up working 16-hour days. Wow. Because I didn't have systems in place to do that, to prioritize, to take a look at what I was doing all day and figure out, okay, these 3 things I could get rid of. These 3 things I can delegate. My first business coach would probably save my life, literally, because I learned how to prioritize and not just go for the shiny object, not just be, the best at everything I had to be in every moment until I was asleep. My bad habit at the beginning of my career in the mortgage industry was get up, do as much coffee as possible, work all day, have a glass of wine and pass out, and then do it all over the next day. And I did that for about 5 years, and I got sick. I actually almost, I couldn't do it anymore. My body physically stopped. It just said, nope, done. And so prioritizing and looking at what matters, what's important, where am I best used in my day? Who could do this instead of me, right? I said before, I have a team. I mean, there are all these people who help me get something done. And when I first got in the business, I did everything anyway. I just assumed I had to do it all. And so looking at a blind spot, there's a big one, thinking I have to do it all, right? And lots of women do that, especially. I mean, men do it too, so I don't want to just compartmentalize, but we all do it, right? We think, oh, if I'm going to do well in life, I have to be the one to charge forward and do it all. And having learned that that's not true, and in fact, when I'm not following my values and I'm not prioritizing my day, I'm not doing such a great job for anyone, including myself. My clients are suffering, my business suffers, and at different times I've had to actually stop because I get sick from it. So great question. That's really, really powerful.
Well, I would say first off, like trying to power through that. Sometimes you can't power through. And it's like you recognize that in like the most personal way possible, because your body would just said no. And with me, sometimes it's, is like I've got stuff to do, but then life takes over. And it's like I said, if I start doing the laundry first, and then one thing leads to another, and then it's like, 3:00 in the afternoon, I haven't done any work, even though it's work. It's not like, work that pays work. And my kid is home, and now I can't do anything till he's down for bed. And, do I really want to be working at 10 o'clock at night? So it's like you said, priorities, prioritizing your day, and, an awareness of how much you can get done in a given time, and balancing that with the other things that you need to do with regards to your personal life. And sometimes your personal life does overtake, even working outside the home. That sometimes occurs. It's and in some ways, working from home, it can be. I mean, I'm my own leader. My team is me. So I have to lead myself to have a balance, a work-life balance that works for me, for the rest of my family, for my business.
You may have inadvertently, you did, maybe inadvertently, walk right into territory that I love, which is personal responsibility. Mm. A lot of us require other people to tell us what to do, to set an expectation, to give us a plan, to tell us what the priorities are, and then let us figure out the actions to take, right? Mm. It takes a lot to shift out of that. It takes a lot to think about thinking, and what does thinking look like, and what is the thinking that is to be done now for the most impact, not only today, also down the road. Maybe that's 3 months, maybe that's 3 years, maybe that's 13 years. And it makes me think about, the roles that we are in, all right? The roles that we're in, and where we are at, and where we are going. And I'm going to think about that because we have growth strategy on so many levels. We have personal growth strategy. We have our roles growth strategy. We have our company's growth strategy. We have our personal, which envelops all of it, right? Our personal development that we want, not only at work, but then of course in the broader spectrum of life. So how, if we don't address blind spots, let's look at it from that perspective, how does that impact our growth strategy?
It will affect it negatively in the short and the long term. Say I have a goal. Through February, I want to get 3 books to edit, 1 book a month to edit. And how am I going to do that? If I don't address my blind spots of prioritizing the work, of social media marketing, of just keeping in mind, the need to be on a network to bring in the business. All this plays together. And then I won't have a book now, and I won't have a book 3 months from now. All of these things working in concert will bring in the business. But if I let it fall by the wayside, then 1 month I'm going to be like, okay, nothing's on my plate. The way that editing and copywriting freelancing works, it doesn't just fall out of the sky. You have to do serious ongoing networking, both online and in person, to get the business, to find clients.
That's what it comes down to. Doing something with clients, getting more of them, getting more from them, getting more in other places, right? What would you add to that, Liana?
I just keep thinking about how my first business coach saved my life. I mean, it's all about planning. It's all about putting things down on paper, taking the time to think about it, making sure that personal and professional goals make sense and that they're driven for the right reasons. I went through a big change the last couple of years. I moved towns. I've been rebuilding personally, professionally. Had a major surgery a couple of years ago, so I've had health things to deal with. And I'm really learning to choose what I'm doing all day. That's a new one. And I would say, the way that relates to blind spots is it was a blind spot. When I was younger, I thought, oh, just push through, just work 16-hour days, just be magnanimous and great and be outrageous and it'll just work out. And that didn't happen in quite the way I thought. I mean, I did have success doing that. I made money, but then I was so exhausted and my personal life didn't work at all. So it's huge. Mm-hmm. So choice and planning, I think, are the two keys. Taking the time, Jess, you were saying that, getting quiet, actually thinking about what do I want to accomplish today, next month, next year. I love this time of year. And I just today posted on Facebook something about planning for next year. What do I want 2019 to look like? And I spent a lot of time writing things down, getting introspective, taking the time to plan both personal and professional goals between now and January. And I like to do it with friends and with colleagues too, so I know where they're coming from and I know how I can help them, how I can be supportive with the people that I know and care about and help them meet their goals too. So I think business planning is really important. Personal priority lists. Again, going back to time blocking, going, what am I doing all day? So that I'm not constantly at the whim of a client or the next phone call or the next thing that comes up. It's so much easier. There's actually more time in my day when I do that. I mean, there aren't more hours, but it feels like there's twice as much time in my day when I take the time to think about what do I want to be doing right now. And I have a map, and the map changes. The map's always going to change as the day goes on, as the month goes on, and the year goes on. But it's a starting place, and I can go back to what was that thing I said I wanted to do. What was it I wanted to accomplish? I was just looking at this the other day. I have a book I never finished from about 10 years ago, and I'm in this women's empowerment group, and we've been talking about goals, and almost everyone in the group is a writer. And I go, and it hasn't been something I'm really sharing as a top goal for next year, but there's this little voice in the back of my mind going, wait, what about that book? You wrote all the chapters. You have an outline. You even have all the characterization and, half of it done. Just do it. So, in order for that to happen though, I have to make that a priority and I have to put it in my calendar. I can't just say, oh, what a great idea. Because I will just end up doing the laundry or hanging out with my kiddo or trying to exercise more. I have to make sure that the things that I really want to accomplish are there right in front of me every morning and every night. And then I look at that and I revisit it every week and make time for it.
What makes it bold to embrace your blind spots?
It's bold because a lot of people just don't. A lot of people just push it down and ignore it and just hope that things are magically going to get better. And then one day, it kind of explodes in some way, metaphorically. speaking. Having self-reflection and then acting upon that is bold, because so many people don't do it. That when you see somebody taking action on it, it's really startling to see.
I think it's outrageously bold to be willing to say, that didn't work. I didn't know I do that. Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing with me and teaching me that didn't work for me or you, instead of just pummeling through. It's so outrageously bold. It's so powerful to be able to own our blind spots and to be able to use them as teachers.
You'll find all the program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P187. That's voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 187. You may also search the site for Leadership Blind Spots. Now it's your turn to keep this conversation going. Tell us what you think by rating this program on iTunes, iHeartRadio, YouTube, whichever platform you're listening or watching us through. And use hashtag VBB Radio and email radio@reddirection.com. Send in your comments, send in your questions. We will work them into the programs. We will answer them maybe outside of a program across social media, and definitely respond back to any emails that we receive and mentions and tagging that occurs. That said, take this information and learn from the experiences of Liana and Pam. Hear what they had to say and practically apply their experiences in your world. Take it one step further. Use what other people have to give so we don't have to experience as much ourselves, and we can make more progress and more leaps forward than we thought possible. Remember, it's to your benefit to factor in your own leadership blind spots.
The Voice of Bold Business Radio gives you insights about how to achieve your company's growth strategy. When you aren't seeing the growth results you want, it's time to get an outside perspective. To discuss your specific situation around growth strategy, work with us. Visit voiceofboldbusiness.com and click Find Out More. Special thanks to the Scott Treatment for technical production. Thank you for joining us.